This thing angrily starts charging at him down the hallway. Johnny turns around, he runs all the way back through the kitchen into the living room, and he grabs his mom and he starts shaking his mom. He says, "Mom, it's coming, it's coming."
So once again, you found yourself at the campsite of the Orator. Please pull up a chair. As you can see, my fire is stoked, which means tonight I have 2 tales to tell. But before we dig in, if you do find yourself enjoying this kind of content, first-hand accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then please like this video, but then subscribe to my channel. When you do, you will get notified every single time I upload new content, and it helps me to continue to do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. Second, tonight's stories do come from a subreddit called Real Scary Stories, but I do collect all of my stories from first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. So, if you or somebody you know has a supernatural or paranormal account that is first-hand, please reach out to me. I will have my socials listed, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, any of those are easy. I'll also list my email. You can shoot me an email. But basically, you and I will get on a video conference together, and I will collect your story firsthand so you can tell it to me, and then I will retell it here on my channel. So if you do have a story, please reach out. I would love to tell your tale one day. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get on to tonight's double feature. Our first story is a story I like to call, Help Me, I'm Lost. So we're in the early 90s in rural Oklahoma, and you have John, he's about 10 years old, and his mom, Samantha, and they live alone. It's just the two of them, and they have recently purchased a lake house in rural Oklahoma. Really beautiful place. You know, it's pretty small because it's just the two of them, but very scenic right there on the lake, and they're surrounded by forests and stuff like that, so it's a very beautiful location. So it's the middle of the night, and John is asleep in his bed when suddenly he comes awake, and he immediately gets this sense that something has woken him up. And this is very atypical. He doesn't sleep fitfully at all. He usually sleeps through the entire night, and so to be woken up by something in the middle of the night is just abnormal all by itself. But as he's coming awake, he just has this really weird sense that something is wrong. And so he's laying there in his bed, and he's just sort of listening to the quiet of the house, and he can actually hear his mom snoring from the living room. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, and she's out there, and he can hear her kind of snoring in her regular breathing. And so using that as sort of a touchstone, he starts to calm down and tries to fall back asleep. Only as he's laying there, he realizes he's kind of got a call of nature. He has to go use the bathroom. And so slowly he gets out of bed, and in order to get to the bathroom, it's on the other side of the house. And so he has to slip out of his bedroom, kind of go past his mom who's in the living room, through the kitchen, and then down the hall, all the way down, and on the far left-hand side, there's the bathroom. And so he doesn't want to wake his mom, so very quietly, he's stepping through the house, and he gets to the bathroom. He goes to the bathroom real quick, and then he flips off the light, and he starts walking back down the hallway towards his bedroom, when all of a sudden, the bathroom light clicks back on again. And he is facing away from it, but he can hear the click of the light. And he's like, okay, that's really weird. And so then he turns around, and he can see the hallway is illuminated, and that bathroom light is on. And he's like, okay, I know I turned it off, and I heard it turn back on. And then all of a sudden, the light starts flicking on and off rapidly. Click, 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 click. And he's seeing the light flash on and off, flash on and off. And then all of a sudden it flashes off. And it stops. And he's just standing there, staring down the hallway, wondering what the heck is in his bathroom. And then all of a sudden, as his eyes are adjusting to the dark of the hallway, he sees this shape. And it's about his size. He's a 10-year-old boy, so it's like maybe 4.5 feet tall. And as he's watching, this thing crouches all the way down on all fours onto the floor. And he can kind of see this vague white outline. It looks sort of human, but it's really dark, and he's on the opposite end of the hallway. It's really hard to see, and all he can really see is sort of this white outline. And he's watching as this thing slowly gets down to the ground, and then he hears this voice come out of the hallway, and he realizes two things. Number one, he's alone with his mom. There's no one else in this house. And two, this thing, whatever this thing is, this is not a human thing. This is not a normal thing. So this thing is crouched down to the ground, and all of a sudden he hears this deep man's voice say, "Help me. I'm lost." And he is so terrified. You know, John, he wants to scream out. He wants to scream for his mom, but he literally can't make a sound. It's like one of those horror movies or stories where you hear where they need to scream, and you're like, why aren't you screaming for help? And he wants to scream for help. He knows he needs to scream for help, but he literally can't make the noise. And all that comes out of his mouth is no. He's not going to help this thing. And so this thing angrily starts charging at him down the hallway. Johnny turns around. He runs all the way back through the kitchen into the living room, and he grabs his mom and he starts shaking his mom. He says, "Mom, it's coming, it's coming." And he doesn't know what else to do or what else to say, but his mom, she goes from being dead asleep to alert and awake, and she grabs her son, and she's kind of frantically looking around like, what's coming, what's going on? And she looks past his shoulder and sees this thing coming barreling down the hall. She grabs her son, runs into his bedroom, slams the door, holds him, and then pushes herself against the door, waiting for this thing to hit against their bedroom door. And so she's sitting there, she's holding John, she's terrified, he's terrified, he knows she saw something, and they're sitting there waiting for this thing to come out, but all of a sudden, instead, they hear this thing pacing around in the kitchen, and you can hear its legs clicking across the tile. And they're just sitting there terrified, they don't know what to do, when all of a sudden, this thing is making circles around the kitchen. All of a sudden, it opens this sliding glass door that's attached to their kitchen. They hear it open and slam shut, and then it's totally silent in their house. And they're terrified. They don't know what to do, but they know that they're at least safe if they stay in this bedroom. And so they literally wait in that bedroom all the way until the sun rises, and then immediately John's mom packs him up and sends him a town over to her parents, his grandparents, and she says, "You stay there for a while, and I'm going to deal with this." So she sends him away, and then she ends up selling the house, and they literally move away. And to this day, she's never explained exactly what it is that she saw. She said, I don't know how else to explain this, but I feel like if I talk about it, it's going to know that I'm talking about it, and it's going to come back and try to hurt us. And she said, after she sent him away, she kind of researched the property, looked around, and she had found these old headstones on their property and done some research, and there were 3 young children who died in the early 1900s on their property and were buried there. And so she thought possibly that could be what it was. And when she tried to discuss it a little bit with Johnny, says, I don't know, Mom, but what I heard was a deep man's voice. I didn't hear a kid's voice, so I'm not sure if that's the case, but I have no idea. But until this day, they have no idea what happened. They won't discuss it because they're, John's mom, she just does not want to invoke evil and bring it into their lives, and so she's just done with it. And so now that they've moved away, they have thankfully had no other incidents. Real quick, before we move on to our next story, I do just want to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I really do appreciate everything that you do to help support me, and I hope that I continue to deliver A-class content for you guys. I do love making this stuff. And again, if you or someone has a story, please reach out to me. I would love to be able to tell your story on my channel one day, and just make sure to reach out, like I said, one of my socials, email, something like that, and then we could get your story on our channel. And I would absolutely love that. Thank you so much. Now, let's move on to today's second story in our double feature. It is called The Bumpy Man. So it's January of 2011, and you have Audra. She is extremely pregnant and currently living with her mom. She's about to have her very first son, a baby boy she names Mark, and she is going to be doing the single mom routine. And so she does give birth to Mark, and they are living with her mom, and there's quite a bit of tension going on there between her and her mom. And so at some point, Audra decides, even though it's really helpful to have my mom around, we are butting heads so much and it's causing me so much stress, I'd rather move out and not have to deal with the stress that it's causing. And so she does find a really nice apartment for really cheap, and she thinks it's a little bit weird because the landlord said, there were some girls who were living here, they moved down to Florida, they left this place kind of a mess. It's going to take a little bit of time to kind of put everything in order, but as soon as it's available, I will let you know and you can move into the unit. And Audra thought, okay, that's cool, but it's weird because they're not checking my credit, they're not running a background check, this apartment is really cheap. And so she has a little bit of nervousness around that because it's strange, but she's not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. She's a single mom. This is a cheap apartment. Seems like a win for her. And so she does eventually move out when her son, Mark, is about 2 years old. So now we're in the summer of 2013, and they have this little cute 2-bedroom apartment. It's not huge, but it's perfect for them. And slowly, over time, Audra, she starts to make that house a home. She furnishes it with some stuff that she really likes, and she's sort of starting to make this place feel like their first home together. So one day, still pretty early on, they have the house starting to get furnished, but they're both sleeping together in one bed in, what will eventually be Mark's bedroom. It's just sort of a guest bedroom for now while she puts everything together. Well, one day early on, Audra, she's off kind of doing some stuff. Mark, he's playing in that spare bedroom. When she hears him, and he's only 2 years old, but she hears him start to laugh, like someone is making him laugh. Something is hilarious to him. And so she kind of smiles and she pauses, she puts down what she's doing, and she walks over to that spare bedroom, and she sees Mark is just standing in a corner kind of staring up, laughing at something. There's nothing there, but he's just sort of staring at nothing and laughing. And she walks in and she kind of leans against the door to sort of watch him. And all of a sudden, abruptly, he just stops laughing. And instead of seeking out whatever's making him laugh, he just slowly turns around, looks at his mom, and then kind of waddles across the floor and comes up to her. And she's kind of looking around like, one, what made you laugh that hard? And two, what, you just stopped out of nowhere? She said it felt almost like someone told him to stop and to come to her. And so she thought, that is really, really weird. And so, Audra finds that pretty odd, but she sort of dismisses it because he's 2 years old and it's whatever. So a couple of months pass and no other incidents, and they slowly continue to make the apartment whole. And now Mark has his own bedroom, but he's still 2 years old and he often still sleeps with his mom. And so all of a sudden it's the middle of the night and Audra is asleep and she wakes up to Mark laughing again. And he's in her bed and he's full belly laughing at something that he must find absolutely hilarious. And so she kind of drags herself out of sleep, and once again she thinks it's really cute. She's completely forgotten about the previous time and how strange that was, and now all of a sudden it's completely dark. She's facing the window and there's some moonlight coming in so she can see his face, and she can see that he's not looking at her, he's looking past her, kind of into the hall, or maybe even into the closet, but something beyond her in the bed. And so she's kind of smiling. She says, honey, what are you laughing at? And he points past her and he says, the man. And he starts laughing again. And then all of a sudden he stops and he kind of gets surprised. And then he puts his hand up to his lips and he says, shh. No, Mama. No, man. Good night, Mama. And Audra gets super creeped out because it's very obvious that he just got orders from somebody. Somebody told him, to tell your mom, no, there's no man, don't worry. And so right away she gets up and she's looking around, she checks the closet, she's flipping on lights, she's looking all over, and needless to say, got literally no sleep that night, super terrified. And so slowly, as the weeks go by, Audra will catch Mark having conversations with somebody, continuing to laugh on his own, and she's sort of not as creeped out now because it's always during the day, no more weird stuff at night, and she's kind of thinking maybe, he's just at that age where he has an imaginary friend. And so, one of the days she kind of hears him, he's in there in his bedroom laughing and talking, and she kind of walks in, she says, hey, bud, what's so funny? And he just says, the man, he's so funny, he tells me jokes, He's funny. He's not a monster. He's funny. And, she's a little bit weirded out by it, but, she's like, you know what? Maybe he's happy. He's laughing. There's nobody here. It must just be an imaginary friend, and maybe I should just let him have it. But even though she's not creeped out now, her curiosity is a little bit piqued. And so another time, a different incident, she hears him in there, and he's having a conversation with whoever this, imaginary friend is. And as she's listening, she's realizing this is a full conversation. And he is talking, and he's only 2 years old, almost 3 now, but he's having a full-blown conversation, and she's hearing, there's just something about it. His vocabulary is a little more than it should be at 2 years old. She's just getting a weird sense that this conversation isn't normal. And so, she doesn't want to mess things up too much, but she does walk in, and she's like, hey, bud, who are you talking to? And he says, the man. He's telling me jokes, Mom. He's funny. And, curiosity piqued, she says, what does the man look like, honey? And he says, the man, he's bumpy. But he looks like a monster, but he's not a monster. He's funny. He tells me jokes. He's so nice. And so, she's like, all right, he's a bumpy man. I don't know what that means, but clearly, nothing to be worried about. My son is just having an active imagination, and it is what it is. And so, time continues to pass in this way where she continues to hear Mark have conversations with this bumpy man, and, he's laughing all the time, but nothing else ever seems to come of it. Well, one night, she's asleep, and all of a sudden she wakes up to this loud argument happening outside. Now remember, she's in an apartment complex, lots of other neighbors, and one of them is in some sort of really big fight in the middle of the night. Sounds like maybe alcohol is involved. And so she gets up, and Audra's about to just go lock the door. Now, she grew up in a very rural place where you didn't really lock the doors very often, and she still sort of had that mentality, but she's thinking, even though it's not really dangerous, I don't want somebody accidentally coming in here, and they're intoxicated and they just mistake my house for theirs, so I'll go lock everything up. And so she goes to the door, and there's basically 3 different locking mechanisms. You have the actual door itself that you can lock, there's a deadbolt you can throw, and there's also a chain lock you can put on. And she never has any of them. Maybe sometimes she'll throw the door lock on, but that's about it. Well, she walks up to the door, and all 3 locks are latched. So the door lock is locked, the deadbolt is thrown, and the chain are all on. And she's thinking, okay, maybe I woke up in the middle of the night and tired mommed the door. I don't know. She's a little bit confused, but she's like, all right, well, the door's locked. I guess it is what it is. And so she goes back to bed, only to be woken up early in the morning by her son. He comes running in. He says, Mom, didn't you know? The good man, he saved us. The bumpy man, he saved us. He locked the door from the bad woman. He saved us. And Audra's like, what in the world is going on with this? You know what I mean? She thinks it's this active imagination, but she's starting to get really weirded out by the whole situation. And now the bumpy man has somehow locked the door. And she just really doesn't know what to think. And so one day, Audra is just doing her normal routine, and she is grabbing some groceries from her car, and she's about to head back up to her apartment. And she gets in the elevator, and one of her neighbors stops her and says, hey, I know this is kind of a weird question. Sorry, I don't want to sound rude, but how much did you end up paying for that apartment up there? And Audra's a little confused. She's like, why do you ask? And she's like, well, you know what happened there, right? And Audra's like, yeah, a bunch of teenagers kind of made a mess and screwed everything up, and they had to fix it and stuff like that. And the neighbor's like, no, that's not at all what happened there. There was a father and his son, and the lady says, they had this weird genetic disorder where they developed these boils or polyps on their skin, and it was really bad to the point where this kid was teased really horribly, and everybody said he looked like a freak and a monster and stuff like that. So he had a really debilitating life. And then, unfortunately, he overdosed on his medication and passed away in that apartment. That's why it took a long time for them to clean everything up and get everything moved out and before you moved in, and why you probably got a really cheap apartment. And Audra's processing this and realizing what the implications of this are. And then the lady says, it's a real shame, too, because this kid was the nicest kid in the world. He would always talk to my kids and make them laugh, and he'd say, see, I'm not a monster. I'm just telling jokes. I'm just a good kid. So that's going to wrap up today's stories. If you did find yourself enjoying this kind of content, first-hand accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then like this video and subscribe to my channel. You will get notified every single time I post new videos. and it continues to help me do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. Second, if you do have a story, first-hand account of supernatural paranormal phenomenon, or you know somebody who does, please reach out to me on any one of my socials or my email. Hit me up. We will find a time to get together so I can collect your story and tell it on my channel one day. And so that's going to do it. Until next time, please pull up a chair. My fire will be stoked, and I will have another tale to tell.